Mr. Mayor, we have a mayor in our community, very important community city here on the peninsula. He has said that we are not in the water business. He doesn't want anything to do with it. And that's a shame, because it would be very important to us. It would be really slam dunk if his community, or if under his leadership, he said, okay, we would take it and we'll run the water department for you. But since he hasn't said that, what would you tell him? How would you advise him to get him to look the other way and turn around and support water?
So my advice is free and worth every penny. And again, I don't intend to come into your communities and second guess you, nor do I intend to second guess elected officials. I will tell you, however, that municipal government is about the provision of services in the most efficient way, and that provision of services is really about the essentials. It's about the stuff that we can't do individually, and the stuff the private sector doesn't do particularly well for a variety of reasons, or because they are monopolies. The provision of water is an essential service. The provision of water, I believe, falls well within the wheelhouse of municipal government. Countless municipalities around the United States own and operate water systems, and the reason they do is because they do it pretty well. They do it at cost, and they do it to the benefit of the citizens they serve. And I'm not sure that there is a much more essential service than the provision of the stuff of life.
I've got one here, George.
Can I add something to that, John? Don't leave. I would say simply this, that a decision to do nothing in this situation is a bigger decision than the decision to try to do something.
So I have a two-part question. One is, it sounds like most of the discovery that you had to do was in order to get the information, so I take it that the public utility entity didn't have that information. So that's the first question. You really couldn't get it from the public utility. And the second is, how did the city pay for the legal expenses?
You're correct that the Montana Public Service Commission was not privy to this information, largely because they didn't know to ask for it, I think. With regard to the legal bills, I shred all of the invoices. So I'm unaware of any expenses associated with that. No, the fact of the matter is that we have on our side of the table, we've racked up about $7 million in litigation costs, acquisition costs, all in. We've loaned ourselves that money as a function of a calculated risk, and the water utility will pay it back, and our formula has us paying ourselves back for that moving forward.
You mentioned that you had an offer of $68 million and it was rejected. Was that summarily rejected, or did they have a counteroffer?
$65 million summarily rejected.
Second question, you said 50% leakage. I can understand how you can measure the flow coming out of your pumping system in your aquifer. You also mentioned that there was a lot of water meters missing. So how did you figure out what the leakage rate was if you don't really know where it's going?
So the engineers...
Was that a conservative estimate?
Right. So yeah, the engineers did that analysis. Yeah.
That was their internal documents.
Yeah, their own documents.
That's their own documents showed what they were missing.
So they knew?
Oh yeah, they knew. Yeah.
And the PSC did not.
And the Public Service Commission did not. Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't have a single person analyze the leakage. We just got their internal analysis.
You said that you hired in a bunch of the employees from the previous private company. Who actually then in the government runs the water program? You have the employees that do the day-to-day, but is it a commissioner? Is it a group? Is it a hired person? Is it a elected person?
The water utility will work in the same way that the wastewater utility works. It's a department of the Public Works Department. We have a Public Works Director. Our Public Works Director has experience in running water systems in other communities where he's served. The governance will be a function of the city council and the administration, the executive branch. And these folks will, you know, they'll do the day-to-day work, but in terms of policy, governance, all of that now rests in the hands of will rest in the hands of Missoula City Council and the executive branch, me and Dale and our team. And we'll set rates. So, you know, rates are now set by the Montana Public Service Commission. Under Montana law, Public Service Commission has no oversight over municipal rate making. We'll make our own rates. The beauty of that is the level of accountability. If any of you have ever served in elected office, you know that you don't go to the grocery store without having a conversation about a pothole, dog barking, or why you're a communist buying the water system.
So that public works director that's going to be in charge of the water part, is that person elected? Is that person appointed by the council?
Hired by the administration
Hired.
with council approval, yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
Reflecting something that Natasha said, thinking about that with our own system it seems to me, as I understand it, that anytime there's like a little dirt spill and Cal-Am comes out and cleans it up, they're going to add that to their asset base. And you found that there was a whole lot of things, $1,000 coffee pot or whatever. What I'm wondering is that in the final negotiations, when you were in court, was the court able to not accept all the items that they said were part of their evaluation?
Gosh.
Were they able to knock some of that down?
I do think that the court evaluated the operations in many ways. So one, the credibility was a huge issue, right? And so when they're saying that these administrative services are necessary, then our evidence showed that it really wasn't necessary. When they were saying, we've invested all of this in the system, and we're saying, you've invested nothing, their credibility played against them. When we were able to provide evidence that really showed that their motivation was not to fix the system, but it was to maintain a level of profit for their investors. And so they weren't really fixing the system, they were just putting lipstick on a pig. And I'll give you a few examples. When we had our engineers go out and inspect the system, we saw magically new paint on the walls of well houses. And the pipes that our engineers were supposed to inspect were all of a sudden covered with shiny new steel sheet covers. Wrapped, completely wrapped. So we'd go into these well houses and you couldn't see any of the pipe. It was all covered with
Yeah, there were sunglasses, it was so shiny.
it was so brand new. It was brand new. And so we had to get a court order to make them unwrap the pipe. And of course, what was under the pipe was completely corroded, rusted pipe that had not been cared for at all. And ratepayers were paying for the cover-up on top of all of that. So all of this affected the court's determination in all levels. It affected their credibility. It affected value. It showed that when they said they were investing any money, they really were not investing anything. They were simply putting lipstick on a pig.
Well, let me ask you one more question about that. So the evaluation of the company, I'll just speak really loud, the evaluation of the company, does your public utility, your state public utilities commission, whatever it's called, do they determine that evaluation? Are they making decisions based upon that?
Under Montana law, the valuation is decided by 3 water commissioners that were appointed by the court. One was picked by us, the other was picked by the defendants, and the third was picked by the 2 of those water commissioners. And I believe that it's a similar system in California, that your valuation phase is tried to water commissioners. Let me point out a few other similarities between our plight and yours. The lawyers that our defendants hired, American Water's lawyers. American Water Corporate, yes. Yes, yes. So we faced the exact lawyers that represent your bad guy. Yeah. The expert witnesses that Carlisle and Mountain Water Company used in our case, affectionately referred to by their own lawyer as the A-team. They were really just C-. But we learned that A-team really referred to American Water's team. These are the experts that American Water has used across the United States when they're fighting off communities like yours in condemnation cases. We saw your experts in our case and defeated them. And so in a David and Goliath situation, we won. And we didn't just win against the Carlisle group, we won against the American Water Group.
I must say that the citizens of Missoula are so fortunate to have an honorable mayor and council and staff that are so dedicated to what the citizens want. In contrast, I'd be mistaken if I see one elected official in this room from our community. And that is the contrast. We are fighting the elected officials who are all in the pockets of Cal-Am. The business community is in the pocket of Cal-Am. So how do you advise us to overcome this? Because we've been through it 2 or 3 years ago, and all the ads fighting against public ownership came from the mayors and came from the business community. And I think you were probably told that the amount of money that was spent by Cal-Am and their affiliates were obscenely, like what, 25 to 1.
We should say beforehand, though, that a lot of our elected officials were at the 2 presentations that were given earlier.
Yeah.
So it's changing.
You're very kind to suggest that our citizens are well served. I think they are by the Missoula City Council. You haven't read my email. It's not a universally held opinion that I am wonderful. But it turns out that's an occupational hazard. And I would just suggest, as someone who has served as an elected official now for almost 16 years, it is very rare that someone takes on this responsibility out of complete self-interest. So to the degree possible, and I recognize it can be difficult, think about those elected officials as folks who need more information to make better decisions. And don't think of them as being adversarial, think of them as being folks who are hired to serve you, and your collective responsibility as citizens is to help educate them and help them make informed decisions. That's a little bit Pollyanna, I recognize that, but the fact of the matter is that that while I am occasionally skeptical, I'm still not cynical. And I generally believe that most electeds aren't cynical either. They're trying to figure out ways to do their jobs based on their experience, based on the evidence before them, and in some cases they're operating from a place of fear. They're afraid that they're not going to get reelected. They're afraid that that the consequences of their actions will be too drastic to walk back. They're operating from a place of fear, and when money is pumped in to that environment, it only exacerbates the challenge for those electeds. So again, you do what you need to do, but treat them with a little tender, loving care. Try to give them as much information as you possibly can. And remember, the last time somebody walked up to you and said, "God, you're an idiot who's in the pocket of some foreign interest, but I need you to do this." There's a gentler approach.
This afternoon, we had 2 separate discussions with elected officials and top staff. 48 were invited. We had 18 show up. So they are not uninformed, or at least they're not resisting being informed, because they heard a lot today, and they heard very much of what was said right here, including all the references to American Water Works.
And they asked very thoughtful questions. They were paying attention. It was good.
Yeah, thank you. Your talk is invaluable. Thank you so much. So my question does follow through on what was just said, and that is when they're going to say, well, how will you pay for it? Well, I heard somebody say a $100 million bond measure, but also that you borrowed money. What were the strongest options in terms of financing for this that you considered that could be, told to a mayor that said, okay, great, sounds good, but how are you going to finance it?
So for us, there was never really an alternative to a revenue bond, right? There's only one way to pay this debt, and that is through the revenue we collect from ratepayers. But what we were able to demonstrate to the citizens, what we demonstrated to the city council, what we demonstrated to the judge, and fundamentally what we demonstrated to the toughest audience of all, the bank, is that it turns out people need water. And they've been paying for it for a long time, and they'll continue to pay for it because they need it. And we will take that money and we will pay our debt, and we'll improve the system, and we'll pay our employees, and we'll operate the system, and we'll do it at cost, and we'll do it for the community rather than for profit.
When you did your cost analysis, did you come up with a fixed cost versus a consumable cost percentage-wise?
We didn't break it down into a fixed versus variable categories per se. We did, make adjustments. For example, pumping and chemical, pumping costs, so energy and chemicals for treatment. As we repair leaks, we presume those costs will go down. Really, all our financial analysis is based on using the current water utilities financial statements and just converting them to a municipal basis. We try to be conservative, but we also remove the expenditures that we're just not going to incur under municipal ownership.
I was just wondering, because normal around here, it should be about 30% fixed cost, consumables about 70 in that. Because there was an article written by somebody around here who said that Cal-Am's fixed cost was over 90%, which just is outrageous in my mind.
Though I guess I would say that our water utilities costs are going to be largely fixed. I would suspect that we are about 80% fixed costs in our operation.
Hi, I just wanted to find out about if you're the mayor and our mayor isn't willing to work with us, then we cannot follow what you did, correct?
So it turns out mayors get these performance reviews every few years. and there's a point at which, so this is a fundamental leadership problem, right? There's a community problem. There is likely a solution. Someone has to lead the charge to get there. What I'm seeing in your community is a bottom-up rather than top-down approach, right? This is sort of my definition of grassroots, right? These are folks who are identifying a community problem, recognizing the fact that no one is filling the leadership vacuum, so it's our job to do that. It turns out that elected officials respond to public sentiment. And so what they need to hear from you and your friends and neighbors over and over again is that inaction will not stand, right? And it's not a threat, it's a fact. We believe this is a critical issue for our community, and the only way this critical issue gets resolved is if somebody we hire to represent us takes action. And we hired you. If you're not up to the job, we're going to find somebody who is. And there might be somebody in this room who is up to the job. One of my critics in Missoula once asked our long-term city attorney, Jim Nugent, in a moment of bitterness and sarcasm, he said, "What qualifies John Engen to be mayor?" And Nugent said, "He got elected."
Could you share with us who were the two elected officials that were here earlier today and what communities they were from?
From Pacific Grove, Ken Cuneo and Bill Peak, and Nick Smith. So we had 3 city council people from Pacific Grove. There's 7 on that, 6 councilmen and the mayor. So we got 3 out of 7. In Monterey, we had Tim Barrett, Clyde Roberson, the mayor, and Dan Albert. 3 out of 5. In Carmel, we had the mayor, Steve Dallas, and Carolyn Hardy, 2 out of 5. In Seaside, we had Dave Pacheco and Jason Campbell, 2 out of 5. From the Water Management District, we had Jeannie Byrne, Molly Evans, Brenda Lewis. That's 3 out of 7. Plus, we had the General Manager, David Stolt, and then the City Attorney, Dave Laredo, both of the Water District and the City of Pacific Grove. And Sam Farr came in at the end of the second session. And Sam Farr was one of the leading opponents to our campaign of Measure O 3 years ago. And he was very curious and very, I thought, non-supportive in the beginning. But after hearing from these guys, he got far more open-minded about it. So we'll see where that goes. But those are all the people who got the pitch and got the same message that you guys are getting, also about leadership, also about the role of American Water Works in the Missoula case, also about the different kinds of bookkeeping system that take place in the utility, also about the massive cash cow arrangement that all the public water utilities have. They got all that this afternoon. So.